Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Just a couple of housekeeping things for the attendees. If you can put your questions in the Q&A and just kind of general comments and things in the chat, just so I can kind of keep track of actual questions and make sure we get those answered, that'd be great. And we'll save the later portion of the panel for audience questions. Um, my name's Sydney Chapman. I am a reporter with the Utah Investigative Journalism Project. We're the only outlet in the state that only focuses on investigative work, and we partner with most outlets in the state on investigations, including most of the outlets for the people who work here. Let's go ahead and do some brief introductions. If you all can just kind of talk about who you are, where you work for, the kind of stories that you typically cover. Let's start with Palak, and then we'll go to Elaine.
Hi, everyone. I am Palak Jaiswal. I'm the culture and music reporter at the Salt Lake Tribune. I mostly do features, but I've been with the Tribune for almost 4 years now, and I've learned that culture means just about everything. So I've written about the LGBTQ community, about, immigrant communities. I write a lot about Post Malone and David Archuleta, so it's just about everything. But yeah, I'm super excited to be here, and thanks for having me, Sydney.
My name is Elaine Clark. I am news director for KUER, NPR Utah. We have 5 reporters who cover really big like Palak. Culture is a really big word. So's politics. So's politics and government. But we have 2 politics reporters, an education reporter who this summer has also been covering, death penalty and Charlie Kirk and a lot of other things. We have an environment reporter in southern Utah and a bilingual communities reporter in Ogden. So we cover we cover a lot, try to cover the issues of the day, but do it through a lens of including the voices of the people who are impacted. And we have a really rich opportunity to do that because our primary space is audio. So yeah, we cover a lot of ground, but at the heart of all of it should be, like I say, the people who are impacted most by the issues of the day.
Let's go Tim, Taylor, and then Francisco if you want to go last.
Hi there. My name is Tim Vandenack. I'm a reporter for KSL.com, the news website, not to be confused with TV or radio. And I write about chiefly immigration stuff, multicultural communities, a job that Sydney actually had before me. And I live in Ogden, used to work at the Standard Examiner here, and I also write about things happening up here in northern Utah, Weber County, Davis County, primarily, all sorts of stuff, local politics, property taxes, and probably like most reporters, I get called on to do all sorts of things as well, crime stuff, political stuff during the legislative session, and I welcome ideas from pitches from the public. People always welcome story ideas. So happy to answer any questions. Happy to be here. Thanks, Sydney, for including me.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much to everybody for coming out on a Wednesday night to join us for this. My name is Taylor Stevens. I am an investigative reporter at Fox 13 News, where I have done a lot of different types of reporting, but have kind of had a focus on healthcare and medical systems. I've also done some reporting on education, the troubled teen industry, amongst some other things. Prior to that, I worked with the AP as a contract reporter with their global investigations team on a 3-year investigation. I was part of it for 2 into police deaths in custody as a result of less lethal force. And I'm also a alum of the Salt Lake Tribune, where I covered government and politics for about 5 years. And kind of like culture is a very big and broad topic that almost anything can fit under. So I've done a lot of great stories that have resulted from tips from viewers, from members of the public. So always welcome that and think there's a lot of value in that, and looking forward to this conversation.
Francisco, are you able to unmute and introduce yourself and kind of tell people the topics you cover and where you work?
Of course. Hello, everyone. This is Francisco Vasquez. I work for Univision, Channel 32 in Salt Lake City. I am from Mexico, and of course, at Univision, we cover all sorts of news. I want to say more than 90% of our news are related to Latinos, immigrants, and stories similar to what happens and it's important in our community. I'm so happy that you guys have invited me and looking forward for the next 90 minutes here.
You're muted, Sydney.
Thank you, Taylor. I was just saying, as you guys can see, we have a lot of different kind of topics, beats, mediums covered here. So I'm really excited to hear from you all. I think most people, it can be hard to know who exactly to pitch a story to, unless you're a PR professional, which I think we might have a few of those here. You've probably never interacted with a journalist before. So I'd like to hear from you all, how can people figure out who to pitch? Does the type of medium matter when they're deciding, where to pitch a story?
I can start. I would say if you're not willing to go on camera, then it can be tough to pitch a video journalist. Um, but I would make a plug for it because I do think it's a great way to get your message across nowadays because a lot of people, you all may have noticed, are much more willing to watch videos today than sometimes they are to read. And even we see our print outlets doing more in the video space. So I wouldn't let it deter you, but I think that that can add a layer of extra stress when you're deciding who am I going to pitch, and maybe, pitching a video journalist feels like, oh, I might have to go on camera. That can be kind of stressful or scary. As far as just like the general question of who to pitch, I would suggest finding, you'll have the most luck if you find somebody that is already sort of covering things in that area. So if you're trying to pitch somebody who covers, arts and entertainment, a story about, the governor's race, you might have an angle, but you might be better off trying to find the person that covers government and politics at that publication. So I think generally as reporters, I can speak for all of us here, 1 million emails a day from people trying to get us to cover stories that are completely irrelevant, sometimes to our community, to our beat, to anything that we might have done before. So doing that like small layer of research and being able to say, hey, I'm reaching out to you because I really liked the way that you covered X story and I thought maybe this could be of interest to you. Those always catch my attention a little bit more because I think as journalists, it's really like your inbox is crazy and you're just trying to get through the inbox. And if there's any reason to delete an email, you might delete the email. So doing that small layer of your own reporting, for lack of a better word, of who's the person that might be interested in this can go a long way, I think.
And I would, add that, we do, I can echo that we do get a lot of pitches, proposals. I mean, I make it a point to go through them, at least glance at them, because you never know when an idea, um, may, may be a good idea and something to look into. Um, like she said, sometimes, like Taylor said, sometimes I get pitches. To me, people have read the stuff and say, this looks to be up your alley, whether it's something related to the immigration issue or Latino community or something in Ogden. And I'll typically give those an extra look. I guess one idea is that when you make an idea, I guess if it specifically, if there are people here we can talk to, if you can tie it to something that's going on, a larger issue, that kind of helps as well. But we all, I think, welcome ideas from the public and peruse them, just because that's a big way of getting ideas of what's happening in the community.
I love what Taylor said about doing your own reporting. Um, you know, this is a metaphor I've used before, but imagine that your efforts to get media attention is similar to a car salesman. You could you meet a person, right? You meet this journalist and you're trying to sell them a car. If it's a family of five, you're probably not going to sell them a sports car. And, you know, if it's a middle-aged, newly single man, you're probably not going to sell him a minivan. Know who you're pitching to, right? And understand the kind of stories that that outlet does, and you may come up with a new angle about your own work that you hadn't thought of before. It's funny, I hadn't thought about this in a long time. Several decades ago, we don't need to say how long ago, I was in nonprofit arts administration and was doing marketing. And Mike Runge on Fox 13 was doing a series where he was having people predict football scores or whatever. And I was working for a modern dance company and just happened to know somebody in our troupe was a huge football fan. And so it wasn't about the event that we had coming up, or it wasn't about dance, but it was also a way to make a connection and get some name recognition for our work to an audience who probably didn't necessarily know who we were. And it was fun. It was something different. I pitched it to Rungi and he took it and ran with it. So you might, you know, think of the prism of the work that you do or the story that you're hoping to have told in the community, and help the outlet that you're pitching find the angle that matches their style.
I would just add, like Taylor, Tim, Elaine, they all said stuff that I would echo. I think pitching to news outlets depends on the outlet you're pitching to. A pitch you would make to KUER or Fox 13 is different from a pitch that you would make to the Tribune. And so I think thinking about the medium, I can't remember who said this earlier, maybe it was you, Sydney, that's really important, right? Like who can journalists talk to for this story? We're all looking for people who are affected by an issue, supported by an issue, who is being impacted by this. I think that's everything that all of us can agree we're looking for. I would also say, like, you probably have a better chance at getting your pitch looked at if you send it to an individual reporter than the general tip line. I think we have two editors at the Tribune who look at our general tip line. Those tips don't always go to all the reporters. They kind of pick and choose like what we can handle any given week, given our workload. So if you're able to develop a relationship with a reporter at a certain organization, I think that really helps getting your pitches looked at more quickly. So
Totally, I agree with all of you in your opinions, and of course, you have the experience. And at Univision, well, I will say that resources are also important, right? Because every single story that we get has some, something important, some sort of relevance. But you may have 5 people calling sick or vacations or you name it. It's super tough to know exactly, what to cover when you have limited resources. I don't want to tell you how many people I have at Univision, but we're not too many. We're a small station. I'm gonna tell you that I edit my newscast, I produce, I anchor, and sometimes I have to record myself. Otherwise, there will be no local news here in Salt Lake City. So considering that, or filter, you only get a couple of drops every time you get all the important stuff, right? But if resources were not an issue, definitely at Univision we will consider all the stories related to immigration. Right now, with the current administration, it's super hard to know exactly what's happening. If it's a raid, if it's just an operation, if it's just a police car, if it's just a black SUV, super tough to guess or to find out what's happening. So what do? Well, we don't get any information on emails. We don't get those press releases. I'm assuming you guys don't either, right? We will not get an email saying, yeah, this happened at State and 45th, or in Magna or somewhere else. So it's difficult nowadays. I'm just explaining on what's happening in today's world as of October 22nd of 25, that it's super hard to inform for us, to our community the way they deserve, because news fly, news come and go, and you don't know what's real. We get, I don't know if you guys follow, I'm guessing you do, a few pages on Facebook, Mercadito and stuff like that. And, every single hour you get a person saying they saw an agent, they saw a nice car. So, if it wasn't because of this current administration, what's happening, ideally we will cover all the immigration news that are happening in our state. Right now it's just getting so hard to cover. But for sure, every time we see a mom with, separation of families, or, kids with some sort of problems, that's usually what we cannot miss in our station. Those are the stories that for sure, we will try our best to cover.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point. I think pretty much every newsroom in the country is stretched thin at this point. So we're all having to make decisions about what we can and can't cover just because we don't have the capacity to do everything. So like really doing your research and making sure your pitch stands out is important, because we just don't have the capacity to do everything. I'm wondering for you guys, what are kind of the key ingredients that make an effective pitch that you actually are going to look at and kind of do some follow-up on? Like, is it a certain subject line that jumps out to you? Is it, hey, here's this photo opportunity that could go along with the pitch? Like, what are you looking for?
I can start on this one. I think for me personally, what I said in my last answer, like people impacted, like if I get a pitch that's like, I'll bring up an example of some reporting that I've done. I think, Tim, you've done some reporting in this area too. There was a swap meet on the West Side that went away around last year, and that really supported a lot of immigrant families, right? And so that was not a pitch that I received from someone. That's something I saw on social media. And what caught my eye on that was all of these people are going to be impacted by this zoning change. That's crazy. So I think when you're pitching journalists, getting the people at the top of your pitch is really important. Like, my nonprofit is doing X, Y, and Z to help this group of people. This is why it matters right now. This is the news hook that's going on. That helps reporters pitch to their editors. To be honest, when I'm taking my pitches to an editor for approval, if I can say, hey, this is happening and it relates to this law change or this current thing that's happening in our environment. I'm also, hopefully this is okay, Sydney, I'm seeing people in the chat that are just kind of asking questions that's a little related to this. I personally don't look at like how an email is formatted too much. I will say if you spell my name wrong in the email, I probably won't read it. I feel like that's just journalism 101. Please spell the journalists' names right when you're pitching them. But I don't think there's too much focus on like, is this pitch formatted as, news release, or is it AP style or stuff like that? I think you just have to get the important things at the top. What would this story be about? Why does it matter? Who are some people we could talk to for that story? I think if you have that, and then you have all the other details at the bottom, that catches my eye. So I can really like tell my editor easily, like, hey, this is what this story would be about. This is who I would talk to. This is why it matters. I think that's just a good general format to have in my case. So.
I'm just going to underscore what Palak said about why right now. Like, that's the question we're constantly answering. And, a lot of times the why right now as an outlet, you may be manufacturing events to draw attention to it. Like, oh, we're doing a 5K. I don't know, which to be honest, for me, is what we would call stage journalism, right? Like you've set this up to get attention to a story. I'm looking for a change, much like Palak was saying, a change in the law, right? Or she had a zoning change that really, because would you go cover the swap meet vis-a-vis nothing, right? Like it had been going on for decades. Maybe there would have been a different angle that you would have used, but probably less likely than this we have a sorry, I'm looking because I've got post-it notes all over. One here in front of me says, "Why now? What's the change?" And I ask that all the time. And another formula we use a lot is somebody is doing something for a reason, and here's why you should care. Here's why the audience should care. And if we're not telling the audience why this matters to them too, then our stories just don't perform all that well, right? People are trying to understand and navigate their lives. So finding that, suggesting that connection point, telling us why this story matters right in this moment, to me makes all the difference.
Yeah, I would echo what both of you have said. A few things that I would add. I'm really tired of AI pitches. I feel like I can always feel the computer like as a mediator between, and it just feels something about it feels very kind of overdone often. Like this is a story about, like it's very dramatic sometimes and over promising, I think, and sometimes I feel a little skeptical of those. I don't think you need AI to do a good pitch. I think you're just like, hey, I'm a person in this community. Here's my issue. Here's what I've got going on. Here's some of the what I can provide you. Like I always like when people say, hey, I've got documents. You don't have to overload somebody with documents from the start, but hey, if you're interested in this story, I can provide you with more people to talk to. I can connect you with some people. I have some documents I can share. I think that always kind of makes me feel like, okay, there's a there if I were to kind of head down this road, that it's not just going to be kind of all of this hype. And I think we get a lot of like people that are really like, they really care about an issue. They're really trying to get attention for it. And I just get tons of emails that I feel like, oh, that seems a little like I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to deliver on what you're telling me. It seems a little overhyped. So I'm kind of sick of seeing AI pitches personally. I don't know if anyone else is seeing them. I can always tell because they always are like exactly the same format. But otherwise, format I don't think matters too much. I think it would get my attention more to have like a less to have a PR person pitching me than to have a member of the public pitching me with a good idea. I think that would probably get my attention a little bit more just because that we're hearing from PR people a lot. So it would stand out a little bit more if I heard from somebody in the public saying, hey, here's, what I have going on. But some of the things I look for in a pitch are like, has everybody already covered this? What's new? What, like you guys were both saying, why now? What's different? What are the harms? Because I think as journalists, we really have to be very picky in what we cover right now. And if there are really clear demonstrated harms or risks or some kind of deeper systemic issue at hand, those always get my attention because I think that's an opportunity to have a bigger impact with the work that we're doing. Rather than some of those kind of staged events that Elaine was mentioning. So those are some things I think that I often look for. I think a pitch from a PR person that's like a standard news release can also be good if it hits the right marks, but it doesn't have to follow some particular format in order to get picked up. And I've had a lot of people that have just sent me an email like, hey, here's a picture of some, like I did some recent stories about seclusion rooms in Utah, which are these like small rooms that children with disabilities are put in. They're supposed to be put in when there's a specific risk of health and safety, and it's a high bar. But a mom just sent me a picture and said, like, this is in my kid's school. What is going on? And, she didn't do anything fancy. It wasn't like a big press release. It wasn't a news release. She just said, I'm concerned. I have no idea what this is. We talked on the phone. I ended up doing a couple of stories on it. So I think that's an example of like, you don't have to do anything fancy. You don't have to get AI involved to get our attention.
So I guess some of the things I look at that draw my attention, like if there's an issue and it's affecting a neighborhood or like a school, like, that people are, if it's a lot of people are up in arms about a subject, that will draw my attention. Um, and also sometimes we don't have I don't know if it's a hyper local issue, super local and specific. Maybe we can't do it, maybe we can. It depends. Like I've written about school closures and parents being upset, and obviously it applies to where this school is, but um, so I don't know. It also, if an issue can tie to a bigger issue that is a state issue, that helps as well. Like, I think of like development, that's a huge issue. Like this development is causing an uproar. Maybe the development by itself isn't huge necessarily, obviously important to the people it's impacting, but if you can kind of tie it into the broader issues of development that are occurring in communities all around Utah, then it can be a good idea. And I see a few questions in here like a pitch versus a news release. And I don't know. I guess if you can put something together with bullet points, easy and quick to read, that always helps. Not too long, but and I guess obviously something that impacts real people is always, for me, going to capture my attention.
In my experience, you know, I read every single email that gets into our station. I don't miss any single one. I may not reply, but I read it for sure. Then I mark it. But definitely those stories where, something has happened with our community. And for example, a deportation, a scam, which is very common in our community, that frauds keep coming, and those, you know, chains that, the cousin, the uncle invited you to, and you invested, and then you end up losing several thousands. So those stories definitely, have, you know, you know, easier, or I want to say preferences, but I can see many people falling. Not as much as a few years ago, but they still, scammers still find ways to make people, fall into their traps. So those are, probably the stories that I give number one priority if I had to choose, And but also there's, sometimes where, you think you find the perfect story with the person who has called you or emailed you, and then, some things happen. For example, the husband was arrested because of this, because of that. And then as soon as they talk to their lawyer, they don't longer want to talk to us. So we have to be very careful, with the, the limited resources we have. We just need to make sure that, the story that we're gonna cover is gonna be delivered, to our audience. Otherwise, we just lost 2 crucial minutes from there to 20, which is they cannot come back. We may arrange something for later, but definitely, those stories where, hearts are broken, unfortunately, are usually easier to catch and easier to follow.
Can I just add something quickly? I just want to tell everybody, for all the advice that you're hearing, and we're do your legwork and do this and do that, like, don't be afraid to reach out, because if you don't ask, the answer is always no, right? If you don't pitch, nobody's going to cover you. So if you've got a press release and you don't know where to go with it, don't let this conversation about, oh, do all your homework, stop you from sending the press release. If you don't get an answer, don't be terribly discouraged. I will confess, for all the time we're saying we're short staffed and we can't do all the stories. You know, there are afternoons where I've got a hole in my newscast and I need 30 seconds, whatever. And I'm looking at press releases and I'm like, oh, this is kind of interesting. I can write something quick up about this. And it happens. So, you know, don't be the one who says no on your behalf. You know, go for it. Just go for it.
If I can add something to, if you facilitate, the resources, or let's say you want to send a press release and you include a small interview, small video with, the names and some sort of footage or b-roll, that also is super important. As long as we have your permission, it's easier when, especially there are small stations that want to cover more but can't. So that's also super, super nice when we see people working like that, just facilitating and making things easier for us.
Yes, I think we all have a pitch that makes our jobs easier. I love something that Tim said. If you like whatever you're pitching, whether you're a PR professional or just a community member, like it's important to you for whatever reason, you need to think about why it would be important to our audiences, right? I can totally see if, like Tim said, like a development that really impacts those people, but not to be blunt, but why should anyone else care about it? That's kind of what we're thinking of. So if you can kind of, think ahead of that, realize that that's where we're coming from, I think your story ideas pitches could be a lot more successful. We've had a few questions in the chat just around press releases. So I'm wondering if you all can talk about like how you handle press release. Do you print press releases? Are you just using those as kind of a base for your story? How do you handle those?
I don't like to feel like I'm eating up a press release. I would never probably write a story based on a press release alone, but a press release might have like a kernel or a nugget or something that I would try to expand on. And so I think maybe that's something to know, like maybe somebody will take this kernel from your press release and it'll get, a little mention in the story, but turn into something bigger. I just always feel a little, I think like for journalists, independence is really important, and just kind of feeling like, oh, we're taking this press release and rewriting it is not what most of us got into this work to do. And so I think for me, I don't mind getting a press release. And I think often they're helpful and can alert you to things that you don't know are happening. But I often like to view those more as a jumping off point than as a way of like, hey, here's my story, I'm just going to rewrite it.
Yeah, no, the idea of taking a kernel of a press release and kind of expanding upon it. Yeah, that's do that all the time. So, and on occasion, sometimes where we do a lot of, well, we're under the pressure to pump stuff out at KSL.com. We put out a quantity is they like quantity. So sometimes, um, I will do a press release, not solely a press release. I may know some background that I throw into it. So I have do some rewrites of press releases, especially previewing events. And there's one question in here that I wanted to talk about. It talks about the example, a lot of homeless in the track station close to where I live. Um, they're there throughout the year. It smells bad. Um, so yeah, so that's like a community story. And well, one, I cover northern Utah, so I probably wouldn't cover something like that since that's in Salt Lake. But I guess if it's sometimes it's just anecdotal stuff, um, it's you know, I'm I may go, well, is there more to it? Like if there are people like neighbors who are kind of up in arms about this and they've kind of formed a group to combat homelessness at this station or to get it cleaned up. that would help me rather than one person, saying, well, there's this problem here. But if there are more people kind of involved in that issue, that will appeal to me more. So specific to that question.
I'll throw this in there. I'm not sure how many arts and culture nonprofits organization groups are on, but my eyes kind of glaze over when I get press releases that are like, we are doing this event, please write about us. That's, to be blunt, an ad. And I don't think any of us really run ads. We have a wonderful ad department at the Tribune that I'm happy to refer you to, but our job as journalists is not to share the events that you are doing and get more people to come to them. Our job as journalists is to tell the story behind these events. So I often get press releases that are like, also like I get press releases that are like, we're doing this thing today, can you come cover it? And I'm like, no, I don't, we don't have enough manpower to go out and do stuff. So I would say if you are hosting some sort of event that you think is worth covering, please email us in advance. Maybe we don't cover that particular event, but we use it as a small thing to talk about what your organization does in general, or we use it to write some sort of wider story. Generally, I think I get the impression that press releases go out to every news org in the state, right? So what am I going to get out of this that is different from what KSL is doing, or Fox, or KUER? That's not to say you shouldn't send press releases. I think they should just stand out a little bit, right? Like, I'm trying to think of a good example I can tell you guys about. I think Anna Lee is on this call. I'm going to kind of shout her out a little bit because I think we have a really good relationship where, Anna Lee's really connected to the Pacific Islander community in Utah. So, she'll send me pitches about a business owner or a cultural group that's going on. And then maybe I can't write a specific story about that group at that time, but let's say something happens in the future where I need to reach out to sources in that community. So I think sometimes you have to reframe like the idea that news organizations should be covering your organization into something that is more so like, how can we help news organizations share the stories of our communities, if that makes sense? And often those stories are not in the events that you guys are throwing, and maybe they are, right? And we just have to dig a little to like find a good angle that works for us. So I would say don't be afraid to send press releases, but if you're sending the same release to every news organization on this call, then is it likely that everyone will cover it? Probably not.
Let's say someone sends you a pitch, you love it, you want to pursue it. Can you all walk me through like what your process is in terms of like next step and how you're gonna follow up with that person, how much involvement they should expect?
Sometimes, well, yeah, I'll email them back or message them, hey, that sounds interesting. Um, and then sometimes it may be something it's not happening immediately. So I'll say, yeah, I may not respond and then wait a week, or I may respond and say, hey, I'm interested, and then get tied up with other things and not get back to them for, 2 weeks or something. But yeah, just availability, and just if they have uh, other people impacted by the issue who might be able to speak to the issue, that always helps as well. And yeah, legwork. I see a question here about what sort of legwork. Some a lot of the stuff I do, I have to do fast turnarounds, but I do like stories that require legwork. So I may be working on one bigger story as I do quick turnarounds. So those, yeah, I do like those. They just may take longer, and people pitching them may, um, just be patient. And um, yeah, well, I'll stop there.
Elaine, you're muted.
Am I back now?
Yes.
I've had some real problems since the last Microsoft update with my sound card, which is really ironic in radio. With apologies. Um, I think I might be the only editor in the mix here. And so I just wanted to give you all a bit more of the process because you're hearing about pitching the reporter. Now you have to know that the reporter has to pitch their editors. And the reason I mentioned I have all these tags up everywhere, why now? What's the change? It's like all the questions that I'm constantly asking our reporters who are like, oh, I saw this press release, to which we say, yes, and what about it? Right? That we ask that question a lot. And I think somebody said it sounds rude, but who cares? We ask so what a lot. So if you can help provide those so whats, and then our next conversation is okay, who else are you going to talk to about that? What different perspectives are you going to bring into the conversation? And so, you may have pitched a really good story and then, discovered your mortal enemy on the issue is also part of the conversation. But that's because we are trying to bring in all of the context and the perspectives to help our audience understand. So know if the reporter is challenging you. It is because they have editors breathing down their neck challenging them because we're mean.
Definitely, that's a super great point. In our case, well, we just need to know exactly, deadlines, and who's gonna talk to us and at what time, because we need to come back and edit and work on the story. I'm usually not out as much as I used to since I became an anchor at Univision, but I challenge my reporter to do something that the competition will likely won't do. So if everybody is going to that press release event, I know exactly what everyone's gonna bring back in the A block, which is the first segment of the news, right? So sometimes I challenge her, like, hey, let's see what's what else is out there, right? Because yes, we don't want to miss that event, that press release, or whatever we're getting, but also it's rare that in an event I won't see that particular story in all the 4 6 main news channels, right? So what are you going to do different? That's a challenge, right? So if you miss the story, yeah, it hurts, but if you have a better one, perhaps could work better.
Sydney, I think you asked about like the process, and I think some people have kind of talked about that here. I think it's important to know when you're pitching a journalist, or to have the thought of like I said earlier, am I willing to talk on the record about this, or is this just something I want them to look into? I always like when people kind of specify that for me. If they say, hey, I don't want to be on camera, I don't want to be tied to this, but you really need to look into XYZ, and I'm willing to kind of give you some information about what questions you should be asking, what documents you should be requesting, some of that kind of thing, but I really want to stay out of it. Versus, I'm kind of I might be willing to talk on the record, like we could have more of a conversation about that. I think that's always kind of good to know in your mind as you're pitching a journalist. It doesn't have to be one or the other. I take tips from people that say, I don't want anything to do with this, I'm not going to go on camera, but and I still want that information. So it doesn't necessarily make or break your pitch, but it's a good thing to know as we're kind of coming into a story. But if somebody's willing to, kind of help be your guide in a lot of senses. So I do more investigative stories, so I'm probably going to speak a little bit more to those like more complex, longer investigative type stories, not kind of your press release about an event. But, if you're sending me a press or you're sending me a tip and you're saying, hey, there's a major issue here, there's a systemic problem, or there's these harms, what I'm going to need is like, okay, what documents am I requesting to verify the information that you're giving me? What do you already have? Are you willing to share it? How do you know what you know, and how can you confirm it and help me kind of walk through what you're telling me and show me that this is something that, we should be looking into. So I find for like when people are pitching me, it's often a longer process than like you send press release, I say yes, we write story. It's more, hey, interesting. What else do you have? There's kind of more of a back and forth there. Okay, well, what about now? Would you go on camera? All of this, longer process. And so I think if you're pitching something complicated, I think somebody mentioned like legwork. Oftentimes I do think that those are good stories to pitch to investigative outlets like the Utah Investigative Journalism Project, to investigative reporters, or to people that have like subject matter expertise on a beat that like, hey, they're going to be able to dive into this like more complex issue. But if you're pitching somebody a complicated story, like expect a complicated process. It's not going to be, hey, we're putting this on the news next week. I have stories that I've spent, months waiting for records, talking to people, trying to convince people to go on the record, trying to convince those people that they should give me this document that I want, that I don't have entitlement to through the records process. There can be a lot of back and forth. And I think that that's kind of important to think about if it's a more complex story that requires more legwork, and kind of be willing to work with the reporter through that process. Again, it's really helpful to me if somebody just says, these are the documents you should ask for. These are the emails that will show you what I'm saying is true. Even if I don't want to provide them to you, I can still get those. So that would kind of be my like process thing. And then it comes to the point of, okay, well, now we've written the story and now we're fact checking the story and now I need more documents from you. I need to ask you this question. We're kind of going back and forth. So just to kind of expect a lengthy process if you're pitching something complex that requires a lot of reporting and fact checking and all of that. I think sometimes people expect like, hey, I'm going to hand the reporter all of this information and they're just going to put it on the news. And that's not what, this panel of journalists, I know, like we all hold to that higher standard of wanting to double confirm things, wanting to go that extra mile and making sure that, the information we're putting out there is right. And it's not because we don't trust people that are pitching us or we think they're lying to us, but just to verify and confirm before we put it out there.
Just to kind of follow up, Taylor, with what you're saying, for those stories that require a lot of legwork, like I know our investigative team, we're a 2-person team. So if I see that you've included me, my boss, and like every other investigative reporter in the state, I'm not going to invest that legwork, because why would I, when I think 4 other investigative journalists are going to cover that? It's kind of going back to that like picking and choosing. We do have a question about like the difference on getting the spotlight on issues as opposed to like something like an election. How do you guys go about covering, like, instead of maybe events or kind of, the day of news, kind of those bigger issues, and how can people highlight those for you so you can cover them?
On covering an issue, yeah, obviously, if you can tie it to a broader statewide issue, that's always good. So if it's it kind of depends on the local issue, but if there's a local issue, I do like covering those, because though that's what really impacts people. But it's always nice if it can be, again, tied to an issue that's impacting not people just in that area, but elsewhere. School closures impact locally, but there are many that are happening. And again, development, yeah, that happens everywhere, and it ties to the bigger issue. So, and covering elections in general, covering the local elections, it's local election time. For us, sometimes it's kind of frustrating. as when I was at the Standard Examiner, I would cover local issues, local elections pretty religiously, but now it's hard to make a case for covering, the Far City mayoral race for KSL.com. So I don't know how to get local elections into KSL.com. So it's kind of frustrating.
I think if you do have a hyper local pitch, there are still a lot of local papers across the state. So kind of doing that initial legwork and research and making sure maybe Tim can't cover that, but maybe the Standard Examiner will, type of thing. I don't know if anyone else had any kind of follow-ups to that main question.
And I think the local papers would welcome press releases because they're even more beleaguered maybe than some of us here. So some of the local papers, yeah, that's a good point. Think of them as well. Daily Herald and Provo. I don't even know how many more local papers there are these days.
I was just going to add really quick that when we're talking issues, sometimes that can be really broad, like, hey, you should cover housing more, or you should cover immigration. And like those are topics, not stories. And so I think having a more specific pitch than just like topical can be helpful if somebody's like, hey, I want to see more stories about this. And you're like, okay, cool, people want to read that. But I wouldn't consider that a pitch. I would just consider that a topic that viewers or the public would like to see. So if you want a specific, like be more specific, I think, if you're trying to get issue-based coverage versus, an election, the more specific you can be about this is the specific part of this issue that needs to be looked at will go further and I think be more effective probably.
We only have a few minutes left, so maybe we'll do kind of rapid fire to get these last questions answered. After your press release pitch gets picked up and the news is covered, what's the best practice for following up with news outlets to say thank you and kind of maintaining that relationship with journalists?
I can take this one. I don't know if anyone else on the call will agree, but if you can share the story on your social media pages and get it in front of the people who follow your organization, that's perfect. Obviously, we all have social media sites, we share them, but the people who follow your organization are on your page. And I think it's important to make sure that news is reaching that audience. I always send my sources or people featured in stories the link to the story when it publishes. I say thank you for, being a part of it. I think it doesn't have to be overthought. You can just email us and say thanks. And if you do, that's really nice. We don't get that a lot. So it's just kind of like being a human 101. Just like talk to us like we're humans. And I think when that happens consistently over time, it pays off. We notice people who email us over and over. We notice people who follow up, who share the stories. So, yeah.
We had a question about the best time, day, and places for news conferences and like the worst days or times for that. I don't know if anyone has thoughts on that.
I'd say it's impossible to guess what's going to happen, right? In that particular day when you may have everything planned out and beautiful set, and either storm can come. You may be able to predict it, a couple of days in advance, maybe 3, but not too far in advance. That's impossible. So I'd say have a solid backup plan B or C. When the Charlie Kirk event unfortunately happened, many outlets postponed their conferences because of exactly they knew all the resources were going to be at Orem, right, or Southern Utah. So I'd say have a solid backup plan B, C, and probably an indoor place because you never know what's going to happen. And we can expand of like speaker outlets and stuff like that, but definitely at least have a solid plan B. And if you can see, because we see it all the time, things happen and there's nothing you can do, to control it. Even if you go, online and do it through Zoom or a place like that, it'll be hard for people to connect. But a good plan C will be like record it, send it, and highlight the main key points so we can see it easier. And then in the short time that we may get, we may be able to find something that can work for you guys if an event comes and it's impossible for the media outlets to attend.
I just want to piggyback on that to say, also consider streaming it. If I don't have any reporters available, which happens frequently because they're on something else, but it may be something that I do want audio for, or I would like to understand, maybe just in and of itself or as part of a bigger story. I have multiple computers on my desk and I can keep working while I'm recording your event and go back and transcribe it and process it pretty quickly. I Yeah, maybe we got a little spoiled during the pandemic when everything was streamed. We could do it in our pajamas at home. But there are still exigencies that just mean we can't always be there, but it doesn't mean we don't want to be. And if we have that opportunity, we may be able to use it to still be there in spirit.
I think also I don't cover daily news anymore, but when I did, every other outlet I've worked for had very low or no staffing on weekends and nights. So take that into account. Like, is the one reporter that's working on a Saturday or Sunday going to be able to go to that, or do they have other things going on? Like, just kind of the likelihood of that. And I think our last question that we're going to do, it's my job as a company PR person to get coverage. Can I send a pitch to one journalist and ask if they intend to cover the story so I can move on down my list until someone says yes? Otherwise, the buckshot method is understandably underappreciated.
I accept that the buckshot approach. I realize that people are going to send it to numerous outlets. Mainly, it depends if it's my area of interest. If it's sent to multiple outlets, likely I'll still pay attention if it's my area. Um, and sometimes it's hard to say whether I will cover something or not. And just the ghosting question right above that, I'll quickly speak to that. I guess if people reach out to me personally and say, "Hey, here's a good idea," um, and I think about it and I think about it, I may put it off. I may say, "Yeah, good idea." I guess if I ultimately don't, I guess I try to say I'm not going to do it, and this is why. But I don't always do that. So, yeah. But if it's directed to me specifically, I guess I will try to explain why will or won't do it.
I also want to say that, like, telling people to put some legwork in doesn't mean you should spend 15 hours developing a pitch for a journalist. I think we're talking like a Google search and, some promises of what maybe you can provide if a journalist is interested. Like, hey, I have these documents, I can get you in touch with these people, but I don't know that you need to spend like and I take that concern, and I do think journalists, we need to be better about telling people what we're going to do when you reach out to us. And I think that it can diminish faith when you're reaching out all the time and you're never hearing back. But to just address that concern about like taking all of that time to compile everything, I just don't want to leave the impression that we're saying like, hey, do all of this, do our jobs for us and hand it to us on a platter, and then we'll never respond to you ever again. Like, but doing a little bit of legwork, I think, can help you be more effective in getting the coverage. So I just wanted to kind of make clear what I think we're all kind of saying on that point.
I'll also just add on the like not hearing back from journalists. Like ideally, I would hope that everyone here and journalists in general are like responding to people and saying like, hey, I need to discuss this with my editor. That might be a lengthy process. Please like just be patient. We also all have like 100 million things we're doing in a given day. So if it's a story that takes a long time, there's a little bit of patience that we would hope for. I think also sometimes, we take a pitch to our editors and they don't think there's a story there. So not every pitch you send is going to be accepted. I think, unfortunately, that's just a reality. But that doesn't mean that the reporters are not taking the pitch to their editors and making a case for it. But sometimes it doesn't work out. And hopefully we are communicating that with you. And if not, then I think you're entitled to ask a journalist, like, hey, is there any movement on this? Can you give me an update? So yeah.
I'll just give a quick example from this week. It was actually a pitch from a freelance journalist, and I wanted to do it. And I thought it would be a really good opportunity. And so I followed up and I asked some additional questions. And I think I just also worked a couple of 12-hour days this last week, and things were just overwhelming. I don't need to tell everybody here on this call about that. But yeah, I didn't answer her because I wanted to say yes, but also think I knew I couldn't. And so, she was great. She emailed and she's like, "Hey, I need to know what you want to, are you going to do anything with this or not?" And that was a great entry point, right? I was like, "Oh, she's back at the top of my email box." And I just said, "Look, I really want to, but I don't have the resources for it right now. I'm really sorry." And a lot of times that might be the answer. Like maybe we want to do it and we don't want to say no because we'd like to, but in our heart, we know it's unrealistic. This doesn't make me sound like a good person when I say all of this out loud. It's just the reality. So I think Palik's point of saying, "Hey, knock, 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 remember me?" really paid off this week. I mean, it didn't pay off for her. She didn't get the gig, but now she can take it somewhere else, right? And that matters too. And I get that.
Awesome. Well, unless we're 5 minutes over, I don't want to keep anyone too late into the night. So I think we're going to end. But thank you so much for the attendees for showing up and taking the time to come out, and for all of our panelists for coming at the end of a long news day. I appreciate it. Hope that all you guys have a good rest of your night.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having us.